Diablo 4's first season is fast approaching, and for those of you that survived the patch note monster, which dropped yesterday, you might be thinking, what am I going to play now? It's probably not the build that you were playing before the season, though there are a few exceptions which I'll touch on. And just speaking personally, I'm definitely going to be playing something else, although to be fair, I was probably going to be playing something else regardless of patch notes. I played a lot of Sorceress in the preseason, and if Sorceress was absolutely hands down the best class, Ice Shard's Blizzard Hybrid was the most amazing build ever, maybe Chain Lightning was the most amazing build ever, I probably would have happily played it again. But I was kind of hankering to play something new anyway, and so in a lot of ways, the changes are just a convenient excuse for me to go do what I was going to do anyway. Which is to say, I'm playing a rogue. This is the class that I had the most fun with during the beta, and at least unless Druid changes my mind, it's going to be my starter for Season 1. After messing around a bit, I enjoy the ability to flex between ranged and melee, and play a wide variety of builds. Plus, Rogue has great mobility. As good as, if not maybe a little better than the Sorceress. So what builds might you want to play if you're going to start a Rogue? Well, Twisting Blades is the classic, and it's still super strong. Honestly, not all that much changed with it as a result of the patch notes. No major nerfs or buffs as far as I can tell. Next up, we have Flurry for the melee Rogue enjoyers. And I don't think this build's really for me. It's solid, but after messing around with it at level 15 or so, I didn't really enjoy it. Maybe it improves later, but I kept thinking, why am I not just twisting blades? Although, honestly, I haven't decided on that either, because Barrage and Penetrating Shot are also really tempting. It was Ranged Rogue that I particularly gravitated to when I was playing the betas, and I found, again, it was Ranged Rogue that I was gravitating to after playing around. Probably Barrage or Penetrating Shot, especially because Penetrating Shot got a shiny new unique, a bow that's looking pretty sweet. So overall, I think Bow Rogue is in a great spot, and both of these builds look quite good. I'm favoring Pen Shot, maybe Barrage in endgame, we'll see. Also depends on if I get the unique bow, but I kind of like being able to line up a bunch of enemies and absolutely annihilate them. In fact, after coming off of a Sorceress that required me to crowd control stuff to do that, it's refreshing to just have all of my damage be really front-loaded without having to use a bunch of defensive cooldowns. Although, on that note, having Barrage and Cold Imbue and just freezing things solid and then killing them in the freeze is also fun, so maybe I'm going to be a Barrage Rogue. I haven't really decided, but what I know is if you want a leveling guide for Rogue, all of these builds are over at Maxwell GG. And if you want to know what I end up playing personally, then do be sure to get subscribed, maybe leave a like while you're down there, as I'm hopefully going to be covering it in a video tomorrow. And even if I don't, you'll be able to watch me live over on Twitch, link is below, where I'm going to level up and talk about my experiences. Next up we have Barbarian, and small disclaimer, I haven't played very much Barb, but I did do some asking around, and here's the overall thoughts that I got. Hammer of the Ancients is worse in the endgame than it was before, but it should be completely fine for leveling, because most of the nerfs changed interactions between unique items and legendary aspects you wouldn't have until later anyway. So especially at earlier levels, it's largely unchanged. Upheaval's looking pretty good, you've got solid AoE and nice bursts of damage. And I know a lot of people are probably just going to be playing Whirlwind. In fact, I don't think it even matters if Whirlwind is better or worse for leveling. It could be the worst build in the game for leveling. People are going to play it because this is an ARPG, and players love to spin to win, and I can't really blame them for that. If I was to play personally, I think I'd go Upheaval, just because when I did play Barb during the beta, the two playstyles that really resonated with me were Upheaval and Thorns, and I don't think you can really level as a Thorns Barb. I don't know, maybe I'd try it and it would be super awesome. If you've played Thorns Barb to level and had good experiences with it, let me know down below. The other class that I haven't played at all since the beta is Druid, and after seeing some of the opinions from other Maxwell members, I do think it's going to be in a really solid place. In fact, I'm tentatively going to say it's one of the strongest, if not the strongest class in the game. Unfortunately, where it doesn't excel is leveling. Most of Druid's power comes later in the endgame. So while I am very tempted to play it, and it could very well be a second build for me, I'm not sure I want to start it and deal with a rough early game. Though, if you do, Maxwell has several guides. I believe there's Pulverize, Shred, and Tornado. Again, I haven't really looked into Druid nearly as much as the other classes, and the thing that I resonated with most was actually Companion Druid. So I'm going to throw that in as a bonus recommendation, because personally I think it's really good in the early game. It falls off later, but you can just quickly respec, use one of the actual builds, and you'll be totally fine. Next up, we have Necromancer, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I dabbled in some casual necromancy. Bone Spear took a pretty big hit in the endgame, but overall, Necromancer got a lot of buffs and quality of life updates. In fact, after talking to Echo Hack, I'm pretty positive that Infinimist is insanely powerful. But if you wanted to go Infinimist, for a leveling build, I'd recommend Blight CE. It transitions pretty darn nicely into Infinimist. The build that I had the most fun with personally when playing Necro is Sever. I was kind of using a weird Sever Blight hybrid thing, because I realized that my Shadow Blight can crit, and I can use the Miasma to apply a bunch of Shadow Blights, and then kind of scale both Sever and Shadow Blight simultaneously. Minions are not in a great spot from my understanding, but they do seem to be in a better spot than they used to be, and should provide a pretty solid experience for leveling. I do not know how minion builds or Mindelen builds hold up in the endgame. There seemed to be some disagreement from the conversations that I've seen. However, it's still early days. I think the patch is far from solved, especially since nobody's had time to get hands-on with the hearts yet. And we've only seen the level 20 versions, so it's a little hard to tell how certain things scale. And last but not least, Bone Spear. Yes, it's still great for leveling. The nerfs are targeted at aspects that you won't have till later, so if you liked Bone Spear before, you can absolutely play Bone Spear again. And finally, Sorceress. Sorceress, from my experience, was the weakest class before, and certainly suffers more from the nerfs than other classes. But if you really want to play it, it's viable. And in fact, if you want to play it and your goal is just to level to 100, play with friends, do open world content, maybe some casual nightmare dungeons to level your glyphs, it's still a really fast class that's awesome for speed farming. But if you want to do the highest end content, you plan to do Uber Lilith in hardcore or push Nightmare 100s, I don't particularly advise Sorc. It's going to be a lot harder to play and overall reward your time less. That said, if you want a leveling build, and if you plan to play it casually, like I said, it seems totally fine. You have quite a few options actually. First up, Firewall. Not that gear reliant, and not the fastest, but nicely tanky and very easy to play. Next up, we have Chain Lightning, which is really well positioned to take advantage of the recent buffs to Crackling Energy and Lightning Spear. I think, especially with the new offensive heart that gives lightning damage off of crits, Chain Lightning's in a really good spot. Lightning Sorc, as a whole, seems like it's in a pretty decent place, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being one of the best builds on the class. So whether it's Chain Lightning or Ball Lightning, grab your electricity, be sure to ground yourself, gotta stay safe, and throw some lightning spears at your foes. Note, Thor does not come with a build, he's sold separately. And last but not least, we have Ice Shards into Ice Shards or Blizzard or Ice Shard Blizzard Hybrid. It's still great. I did test it post-patch in a few Nightmare dungeons, and if you're just speed farming, if anything, my recommended change might be to lean into the speed farming, drop burning damage, and don't worry about your single target, because if you're not pushing high Nightmare tiers anyway, that single target doesn't matter. And if you want to know how I played Chain Lightning and Ice Shards, along with some of the mechanics which haven't changed from before the preseason patch, then I'll leave videos to those both up in the description and down below. And again, if you need a little bit of extra help or you're looking for a detailed leveling guide, almost all the builds I just talked about are over at Maxwell GG, along with appropriate disclaimers about what they're good at, what they're bad at, and when you should use them. Personally, I'm looking forward to Season 1. I think the hearts are going to provide some interesting gameplay. Am I going to play it for a month like I did with the first patch? Honestly, I don't know. I spent a lot of time trying different builds, but there's also a lot of things happening. ExileCon's coming up. In fact, almost a month from now, we're getting the new Path of Exile League, and in between Baldur's Gate 3 is launching. So there's a good chance that I do try some other things in the meantime, but for now, it's time for some Diablo, and those demons certainly aren't going anywhere. Or actually, maybe they are going somewhere and we have to stop them. With that said, I'm curious. What are you going to start in Season 1, and was it one of the builds that I talked about? Leave some of your thoughts down in the comments below. And of course, before I go, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for their continued support. Link to that is also below. If you're looking for something else to watch, there's a recommendation on screen right now. You can check out my Ice Shard Blizzard or Chain Lightning guide. Or if you're thinking that, you know what, maybe I'm going to give the season a pass, I have a few indie games that you might be interested in. Links to those will all be up in the card and down below. With that said, thanks for watching, good luck on your season start, and maybe I'll see you again sometime soon.